You have 1559 and 884. Which one would you like to do first?
Mr. Chairman, we're going to do AB 884 first.
Okie dokie. It also happens to be item number 8. That door doesn't open. It's a fake door. Whenever you're ready, Ms. Melendez.
Thank you.
Could you close the door, please? Sergeants. Noisy day, I'm sorry.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee.
Move the bill.
I understand you had a really quiet and uneventful morning, so I'm here to spice things up for you. Kidding. Supposed to laugh at that. All right.
Ms. Melendez, will you just move the mic closer?
Sure. I think perhaps if they could get that door closed, it would be a lot easier for everyone to hear me. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, thank you. I'm pleased to present AB 884, which seeks to clean up California's new tiered sex offender registry. The new tiered sex offender registry assigns different registration requirements based upon the offense committed and the age of the victim. It was designed to relieve certain offenses like indecent exposure from registration requirements that are less harsh than some of the more serious offenses that are committed. Unfortunately, this new tiered system has a horrible inconsistency in the registration requirements for serious offenses. Under this new tiered system, molesting a child under the age of 14 is deemed a tier 2 offense, which means you must register for only 20 years. The exact same offense of molesting a child where the victim is 14 or 15 years of age is taken more seriously and is placed as a tier 3 offense, a lifetime of registry. In addition to this discrepancy, it is extremely troubling that the tiered system is based on the recidivism rate associated with the offense. Researchers widely agree that recidivism rates underestimate the true recidivism rates of sex offenders. And it is also equally troubling that risk assessments will contribute to which tier an offender is assigned. I want you to consider the John Gardner case, who was given a low score of 2 after molesting a 13-year-old girl. And after being released from prison, John Gardner went on to abduct, rape, and murder 14-year-old Amber Dubois, and then capture, rape, and murder 17-year-old Chelsea King. This is why we cannot trust risk assessments. We have an obligation to be wary of embracing risk assessments as the main determinant for how long a sex offender must remain on the database. This tiered system was created to establish equity for the perpetrators. This system, however, establishes no equity for the victims. By requiring only 20 years of registration for molesting young children, we are forgetting about the Chelsea Kings and the Amber Dubois of the world. This bill addresses that by requiring lifetime registration as a sex offender for those who molest a child under the age of 14. This bill is supported by the California Police Chiefs Association, the Riverside Sheriff's Association, and many other organizations. Here to testify today is Catherine Deletry, who is with the California Protective Parents. Catherine?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Assembly Public Safety Committee. My name is Catherine Deletry from the California Protective Parents Association, here on behalf of our co-founder, Connie Valentine. With the focus on sexual harassment in the workplace in the Me Too movement, we are reminded that sexual abuse of any sort is unacceptable. When it is perpetrated against children, it is a grotesque, life-destroying crime. Rape Crisis Network reports that the younger the child, the worse the abuse, the more likely the child is to suffer additional abuse, and the abuse is perpetrated for longer time. Children are sitting ducks for sexual predators. 25 to 40% of girls are molested in the U.S. 16 to 30% of boys are molested in the U.S. Children with disabilities are 4 to 10 times more likely to be sexually abused. Harvard University is bluntly pessimistic about pedophiles. The July 2010 Harvard Health Newsletter states that researchers have found no effective treatment for pedophilia. There is no cure, so the focus is on protecting children. State programs such as the Megan's Law and the Adam Walsh Act seek to limit where convicted sex crime offenders may live and work. These programs alert the community and law enforcement to potential suspects. There is inequity in the current California statute regarding the tiered sex offender registry, Megan's List, when a perpetrator is convicted of a lewd or lascivious crime against a child. If the child is age 15 or 16, the convicted offender must register for life on Megan's List. But in the same crime, if the same crime is perpetrated on a child 14 years or under, that offender only needs to register for 20 years. This inequity needs to be addressed since it provides a huge loophole for pedophiles and reduces protection for potential child victims. AB 884 would rectify the disparity in sex offender registration while ensuring children 14 years and under are protected from further predation. California Protective Parents Association thanks you for your aye vote on AB 884.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other witnesses in support?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Ryan Sherman with the Riverside Sheriff's Association in support.
Thank you. Are there any other witnesses in support? Any witnesses in opposition? Oh, wait, we're going to hear. We'll let them testify first, and then we'll do the Me Too's.
Ready?
Yes.
I'm Leah Chenkin, consulting psychologist and board coordinator for the California Sex Offender Management Board. The board is made up of experts in the field, including victim advocates, attorneys representing the Department of Justice, district attorneys, public defenders, and judges.
Could you pull the microphone just a little closer? I know she'll tell you it's really difficult with all that noise.
Do you want me to start over?
Go,
Okay.
please.
I'm Leah Chenkin, consulting psychologist and board coordinator for the California Sex Offender Management Board. The board is made up of experts in the field, including victim advocates, attorneys representing the Department of Justice, district attorneys, public defenders, and judges, law enforcement representatives, including investigating officers, chief probation officers, parole administrators from CDCR, sex offender assessment and treatment providers, county and city administrators. The board opposes AB 884. The board was the lead sponsor of SB 384, which changed lifetime registration to a tiered system. SB 384 is based on current and reliable research on sexual offender recidivism rates and sound public policy. Research informs us that the longer a sex offender is in the community without committing a new crime, the less likely they are to commit a new offense, highlighting that if an average risk sex offender is in the community for 20 years without committing a new offense, they are at no greater risk than someone in the general public to commit a new sexual offense. SB 384 created a mechanism for addressing higher risk offenders who commit PC 288A. Individuals assessed to be at well above average risk of reoffending on the static 99R risk assessment tool will be placed on Tier 3. Or if the convicted sex offender commits another sex crime while under registration, he or she will be moved from Tier 2 to Tier 3. The board believes that the structure of the soon-to-be-enacted tiered registration system is efficient and effective at protecting the community and uses research and practice to build the most balanced monitoring of convicted sex offenders.
Thank you. Next.
Margot George, I'm here on behalf of the California Public Defenders Association, and you heard from my colleague from the California Sex Offender Management Board. For those of you who might not know, the California Sex Offender Management Board was created out of a CDCR task force, which brought together parole officers, probation officers, law enforcement, 2 public defenders, and everyone else was either psychologist or law enforcement. And that, out of that California CDCR task force grew and was mandated by the legislature, the California Sex Offender Management Board. And they were specifically tasked with coming up with how to manage sex offenders in the state of California. And that is the board that my colleague is part of, and she is a psychologist on the board. And you know probably already that the board is headed by Nancy O'Malley, is the chair, who is the district attorney of Alameda County. The legislation that AB 884 seeks to redo is legislation that was brought by the California Sex Offender Management Board, because after studying the problem, and there was an enormous problem because California was one of the few states in the country that had lifetime registration for everyone, it was just unmanageable. It was so big, it was not protecting public safety. So they studied the problem, and their recommendations were embodied in SB 384, which was passed 2 years ago by many of you who are sitting here today. In any event, that was founded and arose out of a very robust body of social science evidence. And the reason that people charged with child molestation, lewd behavior on children, were moved from lifetime registration to 20 years was because they have one of the lowest rates of reoffense, of sexual reoffense. 86% of those individuals never reoffend. And they're evaluated based on a number of dynamic and static risk factors. I'm not going to belabor the point, but I do believe that it does not make sense to undercut this very sound policy that was enacted by this body just 2 years ago and has not yet even been implemented. So for those reasons, we respectfully ask for your no vote.
Okay, thank you. Any other witnesses in support? In opposition, I'm sorry, in opposition. Now you can come to the mic.